All right, so we're diving deep today into learning English,
Yeah.
and specifically thanks to this super interesting New York Times piece um, about it.
Yeah.
I mean, just the fact that English has like, what, 750,000 words?
It's incredible.
That's kind of daunting, right?
Yeah.
So how do we even approach that?
Yeah, well, the article starts with something that's really important, and that's setting those personalized goals.
Okay, so not just I want to learn English, but like why?
Exactly. Why do you want to learn it? It's like going to the gym. You're not just going to walk into the gym and pick up any random weights. You're going to have some kind of fitness goal in mind.
Right, right.
So, is it that you want to be able to travel to Italy and, chat with the locals? Or do you want to be able to read Jane Austen, in her original language?
So like if I want to be sipping cappuccinos and ordering gelato, like
Mhm.
I got to focus on conversational Italian, I shouldn't be starting with Shakespeare.
Exactly. And the article really points out that, these goals can even change as you progress on your learning journey. But the key is to have that clear vision of what you want to get out of it.
This is making me rethink my whole approach. Okay. Now, the article throws a little bit of a curveball, which is that reading social media is actually good for you.
Well, not just social media, but all kinds of different formats. The article really highlights how the language you see on Twitter is going to be vastly different from the language you see in like a scientific journal. And the idea is that by immersing yourself in all these different styles of English, you can start to grasp the nuances of how native speakers actually use the language.
So like knowing when to wear a tux and when to, be in your casual Friday best.
Precisely. You need to know the right outfit for the right language situation. And so the article suggests, reading everything from song lyrics to blog posts to even those dense New York Times articles to develop like a well-rounded ear for English.
All right, so we've got our goals set. We're reading everything. Now we just start talking to anybody who'll listen.
Well, not quite.
All right. Okay.
The article points out that, while conversation practice is absolutely essential, English itself isn't this like monolithic thing.
Right.
Like, how in British English they say have a go, but in American English we tend to say give it a try.
Oh, I never thought about that. So like, do I need to pick a side?
It's not about picking sides. It's about being aware that there are all these subtle differences in the way that people in different regions express themselves.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, so the article suggests, try listening to podcasts or watching films from different English-speaking countries.
So ditch the Hollywood blockbuster and try like a British comedy or an Australian drama.
The more you expose yourself to these different dialects, the better equipped you'll be to understand and communicate with people from all over.
I love it. Okay, so before we move on to the next stage, what else does the article say is important?
Putting pen to paper, actually writing.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's always the step I try to skip over.
I think a lot of people do, but
Yeah.
the article emphasizes writing because it forces you to actively use the grammar and vocabulary you've been, learning and absorbing. It's like, learning to play an instrument. You're not just going to listen to music all the time. You're going to need to actually practice those scales and chords to develop that muscle memory.
Okay, I'm seeing the light here. So not writing like the next great American novel, but just using writing as a tool to solidify all those skills.
Exactly. The article suggests start small, maybe just jot down your thoughts in English every day, or, try writing a short blog post, or even analyze a piece of writing you've enjoyed. And if you can get feedback from a native speaker, that can be super valuable at this stage.
This is making me want to dust off my old journal.
All right, so speaking of fun ways to practice, the article talks about word puzzles. I love puzzles. Yes. And this is where things get really fun. The article highlights how word puzzles, especially those brain-twisting New York Times crosswords, can actually help you start to think in English. When you're solving a crossword and you finally crack that clue and the answer just pops into your head? That's the magic of thinking like a native speaker.
Ooh.
You're training your brain to make those connections in English without constantly translating back and forth from your native language.
So it's not just fun, it's a workout.
Exactly. It's like that aha moment when you finally learn to ride a bike without training wheels.
Okay, I'm totally sold on crosswords now.
Okay.
But the article also talks about, not being afraid to ask for help. Is this where I confess that I still get tenses mixed up?
Absolutely. The article really emphasizes that, asking questions is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that you're engaged and that you're eager to learn.
Sometimes I get so caught up in trying to sound perfect
Yeah.
that I forget it's okay to stumble.
Everyone starts somewhere.
Right.
And often those questions lead to some of the most interesting conversations and
I
insights.
love that. Okay, so let's talk about like the ultimate language learning experience, which the article talks about.
Packing your bags.
Yeah. Going to an English-speaking country.
Full immersion.
Right. Like, how does that actually work?
Well, think of it like being thrown into a swimming pool. You either sink or swim.
Yeah.
And you're going to learn to swim pretty fast.
You have to.
You're surrounded by the language. You're forced to use it in everyday situations. And you're going to pick up on all these nuances that you would never get from a textbook.
Necessity is the mother of invention. Right.
Exactly. But the article also cautions against going abroad and assuming that everyone speaks English. It's about being respectful of cultural differences and remembering that communication is a two-way street.
Absolutely. Okay, so before we...
Before we jump into the next part.
Yeah, I'm already like, my head's buzzing with ideas. I'm so excited to tackle all this.
We'll be back after a short break to explore even more insights from this fascinating New York Times article. So stay tuned.
Awesome. All right, so we're back and ready to keep going with all this amazing English learning advice.
Yeah.
You know what I'm really liking about this New York Times piece?
Yeah.
Is it's not just giving us tips and tricks, it's making us think about the why. Like, why learn English in the first place?
Absolutely. I think we often get caught up in, the how-tos of language learning, and we forget to step back and think about the bigger picture. And, English is often called a global language for a reason.
Right.
Did you know that, over 20% of the world's population speaks English to some degree?
Wow. 20%. That's a lot of people.
Yeah. So it really puts into perspective how connecting with English speakers can just open up all these possibilities. And it's not just, for business or travel, although those are certainly perks, but imagine being able to engage with different cultures on a deeper level.
Right.
Understanding their perspectives, appreciating their art and literature in the original language.
I watch so many foreign films with subtitles,
Yeah,
and I think about how much I'm probably missing,
absolutely.
To be able to experience those stories without that filter would be incredible.
It's like you're suddenly seeing the world in high definition instead of through a blurry lens.
Right.
And let's not forget about, a vast amount of knowledge and information that becomes accessible when you're proficient in English.
Yeah, like all those research papers and articles and books
Exactly.
that are primarily in English.
Online resources.
To be able to access those firsthand without relying on translations.
Yeah,
That would be huge.
absolutely. And in today's globalized job market, English fluency is often a key requirement for so many positions, even those that aren't explicitly international.
Right.
So the article really suggests that learning English can be seen as like an investment in your future.
Yeah.
It can open up career opportunities that might have otherwise been out of reach.
I love that. So it's more than just acquiring a skill. It's about empowering yourself to connect with the world on a much deeper level.
Exactly. And remember, this journey is for everyone.
Wow.
It doesn't matter, your age or your background. The article emphasizes it's never too late to start learning a language.
I love that message.
Yeah.
So we've explored kind of the deeper why of learning English.
Yeah.
Let's get back to those practical steps that the article gives. We talked about setting specific goals, but how do we make sure they're actually achievable?
So that's where the SMART goals framework comes in, which the article touches on.
Right.
And, the idea is that your goal should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So instead of just saying, I want to be fluent in English, which is a very broad goal, you can break it down.
So a more smart goal would be like, I want to be able to hold a 5-minute conversation about my hobbies in English within 3 months.
Exactly. That's specific. It's measurable. It has a time frame. And the article also suggests that, you can break down your learning journey into even smaller milestones. So maybe you aim to learn, 10 new words a day or watch one English language news segment every morning.
Those small wins can be so motivating,
Absolutely.
especially when you're first starting out. I'm curious about incorporating English into daily life because the article really stresses that.
Yeah.
How do you do that without it feeling like a chore?
So remember that suggestion about reading diverse materials?
Yeah.
Well, instead of forcing yourself to read, a classic novel, you could start by just following some English language social media accounts.
Right.
That align with your interests, subscribe to an online magazine. Even 10 minutes a day can make a difference.
Oh, I could even switch my phone's language settings to English.
Exactly. You're constantly exposed to it. And think about all those times when you might be passively listening to music or podcasts. Why not make a conscious effort to switch to English language content?
Oh, that's a good idea.
You can even find podcasts specifically designed for English language learners.
What about language learning apps? Those seem to be everywhere.
They're everywhere, and they can be fantastic tools, especially for vocabulary building and grammar practice. And a lot of them gamify the learning process,
All right.
so it can make it more fun and engaging. But the article does caution against relying solely on apps,
Okay.
because nothing can replace real-world interaction when it comes to developing fluency.
So find that balance.
Exactly. Now, let's go back to conversation practice.
Yeah.
How do we find those opportunities?
Right. Especially if you don't live in an English-speaking country.
Exactly.
I've heard about language exchange partners where you can connect with somebody online
That's a great example.
and they're learning your language
Yeah.
while you're practicing theirs.
It's a win-win.
Exactly.
And there are tons of online communities and forums that are dedicated to English language learning.
Huh.
So don't be afraid to put yourself out there, even if you're a beginner.
It's about embracing those awkward fumbles and celebrating those little victories along the way.
Absolutely. And the article also makes a great point about not being afraid to make mistakes.
It's so important.
Mistakes are inevitable,
Right.
and they're actually valuable learning opportunities. So instead of getting discouraged by them, try to view them as stepping stones on your path to fluency.
So shift your mindset from perfection to progress.
Exactly. Now, what about the writing aspect? We talked about it a little bit before, but the article suggests going beyond those traditional essays and exploring some more creative forms of writing.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so think about keeping a journal in English, or writing short stories, or even composing song lyrics. It's about finding ways to express yourself authentically while also strengthening your grasp of the language.
Yeah, make it fun.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of getting feedback on your writing. So, connecting with a language tutor or finding online writing communities
Oh, yeah.
can give you really valuable insights and help you improve your skills.
So like having a coach
Exactly.
guiding you along the way.
Speaking of guidance, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive,
Wait, there's more. This is amazing.
we've only just begun to uncover all the gems in this New York Times piece, so stay tuned. In the final part, we'll explore some unexpected and incredibly fun strategies for boosting your English fluency.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of this English learning deep dive. It's really amazing going through all these tips.
Yeah.
Makes me think that mastering English is kind of like putting together a big puzzle.
Oh, yeah.
Each one of these tips is like a little piece
It is. It is.
that helps us see the full picture. And speaking of puzzles, remember the article talked about word games, like how they
Uh-huh.
can actually boost your English fluency?
Right. They're not just a fun way to pass the time.
Right.
They're actually a really effective way to improve your English.
I've always loved a good crossword puzzle,
Yeah.
but I never really thought of it as language practice.
Well, think about what you're doing when you're solving a crossword puzzle.
Yeah.
You're scanning for synonyms. You're deciphering those tricky clues.
Yeah.
You're mentally juggling all these different word combinations. And all of that's happening in English.
Oh, wow.
So you're forcing your brain to engage with the language on a much deeper level.
So it's like a workout for my vocabulary.
Exactly. You're strengthening those vocabulary muscles. And the article specifically mentioned the New York Times crosswords.
Right. Are those better?
Well, they're known for their clever wordplay and those challenging clues,
Yeah.
which is great for expanding your vocabulary
Yeah.
and improving your ability to think critically in English. But honestly, any word puzzle can be beneficial.
Right.
From, simple word searches to more complex cryptic crosswords, it's about finding something that you enjoy and that challenges you.
So it's about actively using the words, not just passively learning them.
Exactly. You're making those neural connections that solidify those words in your memory. And let's not forget about that sense of accomplishment you get
Oh, yeah.
when you finally crack that clue. It really reinforces those new words, and it keeps you motivated to keep learning.
Okay. I am now convinced that I need to download a crossword app, like right now. But the article also talks about asking for help.
Right.
And this is where I admit that I still get who and whom mixed up.
Oh, you'd be surprised how many native English speakers struggle with that.
Right.
But the article makes such a great point.
Yeah.
Asking questions is not a sign of weakness.
Right.
It's a sign of an active learner.
So true. Sometimes I get so caught up in trying to sound perfect that I forget that.
Right.
It's okay to just ask for help.
Exactly. Embrace those moments, because often those questions lead to the most interesting conversations and learning opportunities. Something the article touched on that I think is really important is that learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint.
So true. You don't become fluent overnight.
You don't. It takes time, it takes patience, and it takes consistent effort. And it's okay to have those days where you feel frustrated
Oh,
or
yeah.
stuck. The key is to just keep going. Even if it's just for a few minutes each day, remember those SMART goals we talked about?
Yeah,
Break them down into even smaller steps
right.
and celebrate those small victories along the way.
It's like training for a marathon or learning a new instrument. It's a process.
Exactly. It's a process. And just like any good athlete or musician has a coach or a mentor, language learners can really benefit from finding those resources and support systems that work for them.
So like the article mentioned, finding a tutor or joining a language exchange. Are there other things like that that people can do?
Oh, there are countless online communities and
Oh,
forums
wow.
that are dedicated to English language learning so you can connect with other learners,
Yeah.
share resources, even practice your conversation skills.
It's amazing how technology can connect us with other people all over the world
It really is.
who share that passion for English. The article ended with a really beautiful point about the potential of learning English.
Yeah, it really did. It's about so much more than just acquiring a new skill. It's about opening up these new possibilities for travel, for communication, for personal growth.
The article even had this little exercise. Imagine a piece of English language media that you love, a song or a book or a film,
Yeah.
and imagine experiencing it with a complete understanding of the language.
How much deeper would your appreciation be?
It's incredible to think about.
It's like you're suddenly seeing the world in full color for the first time. All those nuances of language, the humor, the emotion, the cultural references, it all just clicks into place. And that's the true magic of mastering English. It's about unlocking a whole new dimension of human experience.
This whole deep dive has been so eye-opening. We've gone from practical tips to these really deep reflections on the power of language.
And the best part is, this is just the beginning for you.
Right.
We've equipped you with all these tools and strategies to help you on your path to fluency.
So to everyone listening, keep exploring, keep practicing, and most importantly, keep enjoying this journey of learning English.